Poets and procrastinators, readers and seekers in trousers or tiaras, non-conformers and non-believers, gender X and gender equals. Welcome to Eat the Storms, the poetry podcast. Coming to you pre-recorded on Spotify, Apple, Anchor, Google, Breaker, Podbean, Player FM, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Castbox, Podcast Addicts, iTunes. Basically, whatever is your preferred platform, that's where you can find us. And thank you very much for joining us here today. My name is Damien B Donnelly. I get to be your host and producer, and this is episode 14 of season 6, and we are back on track to regular programming. As last week we had a special bumper of a bumper episode while we celebrated the launch of The Storms issue 2, our new journal of poetry, prose and visual arts. Last weekend we had 54 guests from around the world, calling in from each of the 5 continents. Today we are less crammed, but certainly still as diverse. We have white coats noting the weight of a tear, boats at sea searching for lost shores, echoes of deep jungles and river diving in Malaysia, hypnotic and zoonotic arches and pressures while primitive predators roam through the pandemic, the practice of peeling the tamarin perfectly in Mauritius, and that third eye tapping into the unknown abyss. Today we have 6 artists waiting in the wings, so before we begin I think it's important that you settle back, put those feet up, make sure the tea, the coffee or the whiskey coated ice are close at hand, and of course make sure there's something to nibble on. This is Eat the Storms. I'm Damien B Donnelly and I hope you enjoy the show. And our first guest today on the show is responsible for those white coats noting the weight of a tear, as you're about to hear in her poetry in just a few moments. She was one of the 54 stars who joined us last weekend while we celebrated The Storms, as she was one of our star poets opening the issue. She is from London, moved to Yorkshire for university, but now lives in Dunmore on the east coast of Scotland. Fly on the Wall Press published her chapbook Medusa Retold, followed by Precious Metal from Alien Buddha Press and How to Love the Hat Thrower from Selcut Station. Today she is reading some poems which have appeared in Broken Spine and Lunette, and her longer poem called The Silence of the Gannetries is concerned with the spread of avian flu among northern gannets during the summer breeding season of 2022, which impacted the East Lothian coastline, and it's a centrepiece of a new book called Poet Seabird Island, forthcoming from Bucks Against the Current. I am so pleased to welcome back to the podcast Sarah Wallis.
The world stands still to weep. 0.0025 grams is the weight of a tear. Think of the person whose job it is to know it, to pursue that knowledge in a white coat not given to just anyone, to note the rare specimens in urgent copper plate, clear and perfectly formed, as snowflakes make lone journeys of sorrow, the sink of it, the simple warp and weft, a streaking pearl of headlamp, a lone motorcyclist at dawn, and heartbreak crawling across the clean sheet of a cheek. Imagine the interview for such a post, the seeking out of the sort most sensitive for this work that should be the provenance of the tooth fairy's cousins, flickering light barely disturbing a flutter of wings as they reach with a feather for this most precious of things, carrying a pair of tiny gold scales for the measuring out and testing the weight of fragile beauty, the salt content of nature's mirror ball to be panned for and collected like rubies or spice. The double bass goes rogue. I've been waiting for the double bass that weaves past this cafe window every day at 4 p.m. Chinese dragon at New Year with articulated swagger, wags his proud head on the telescoped neck, hard-cased in black, happy wheeling, Clowning bow tie on holiday rollers, he's suited up for a daily constitutional, padding the circuit deep into winter training, laces trailing through puddled water or snow insouciant, elephantine grace prancing the ownership of the pavement, like a fat man who can dance well and never steps on the ladies' feet. But today he's in mufti, wearing what can only be described as a red tracksuit with Go Faster stripes, letting down all the rest in their tough guy black tie hard casings. When the orchestra limbers up, doing laps of the city, a queue of bobbing harps, rollerblading and tutting through the travelling cappuccinos. Dreamboat. A man dreams of a boat. He lives, eats and sleeps, the shape, boards and flap, the yellow deck he would paint for her, and the distinct notion of blue keel in dry dock, her silhouette at anchor, afloat at sunset, and out under sail at dawn catching butterflies. All is ready. Eventually, he is going to dream his boat alive. There is a party for the launching. He names her Water Lily. Someone asks if he likes Monet, but it's after his wife. The man learns to sail his boat from the internet, where you can learn anything, including swimming, should Water Lily ever capsize. His wife tells him she has had enough. It's the damn boat or me, she says. He buys a waterbed, sets sail to windward each night. Visits with giants. In the land of 1,000,000 elephants, a new mother is bringing her jewel for the giant's blessing. He gurgles surprise at the rough hide, and his mother holds his dubious hand fast to the trunk. A crowd forms, murmurs. They never tire of this sight. One so small in his blue wrapper, the other a mountain wall of grey. Trunk lowered to touch his cheek, when the little one lets out a loud hiccup. The elephant fluffs his ears in disbelief, backs away. The new mother is stunned, steps towards the beast, a hand outstretched to implore this god, my son, and she stands her ground of ancient need, to save face to brook legend. A wall of elephant wash tumbles over them, and trumpets sound. The future is saved. Safe as Achilles once was. Another boy so loved, he nearly drowned. The silence of the gannatries. The ledges of 300-foot-tall cliffs should be squawking shrill with cries of new life, busy parentage in motion, flying off to feed, returning with plenty, sure-footed to nests teeming with wide, open, waiting beaks. But, inch by inch along the terrible cliff, abandoned nests grow silent, and lone, drifting feathers fall, where mothers and fathers have failed to return to chicks half-born, half-dead, cold eggs. The colony should be on show, a snowy-topped rock, brilliant with fussy white bodies and guano, but is instead grey and quiet. The odd bird found shaking its head in a falling frenzy of incomprehension and illness. It has only ever known a life of flight into the sun and plunge dive into water, a bird so capable, so adapted to its life. This failure to operate is hard to grasp. Beyond bird-brain calculus of distance, energy and compass, never has the colony failed to fly, failed to fish, failed to thrive, and failed to live. For this is failure in the face of avian flu, and a terrible quiet is falling from the skies. The blue eye shot to black, the golden head quaking. A terrible quiet is spreading through the ages of quiet rock. In the water, pure white bodies bob, heads under. The feathered folk are drowned, and the expert divers dead. These birds that fly extravagant migrations year on year have forgotten how, and float in a grave instead. A lone white feather floats in space, a moment held in grace, between heaven and earth, between the rock and the water, and all they have ever known. A bird in its death throes thrashes violent, head and wing smashes against the rock it once knew as safety, as home. Dashes and dashes itself to destruction until it is drowned. Unable to swim, dive, fish or fly, it takes a place among brethren, a field of fallen angels taken from the light. The rock at noon is fallen to an invisible enemy. The field is taken, and the rest is silence.
Our second guest today on the podcast I had the pleasure of meeting last year at the Bray Literary Festival when I was there to listen to the wonderful Molly Twomey, Luke Morgan and Victoria Kennefic. He is a writer whose work has appeared in a wide range of journals and anthologies and has been featured on national and local radio, along with being the winner, runner-up and highly commended in various poetry competitions. In 2016, Salmon Poetry published his poetry collection In a Changing Light, and right now he's busy working on a new collection. You possibly have already seen him as he is a regular poet at poetry and spoken word events here in Ireland and further afield, and has also been involved as an organiser of such events. I'm really delighted to welcome to Eat the Storms for the very first time the poet who's bringing us those boats at sea searching for lost shores. This is Phil Lynch.
Hello, my name is Phil Lynch. I'd like to thank Damien for allowing me onto this wonderful podcast series, Eat the Storms. So now I'm going to read some poems, and the first one is called Drifters and was published most recently in Flare 17 in January 2023. Drifters. We are drifters, shifting in shadows of doubt, lost in a landscape of half-withered thought. We talk to everyone and no one. We argue with ourselves about how we got here and why. We fantasize our lives into what we are not, because we do not know what we are. It feels good in the moment, until the moment passes, and we are adrift again, in the unsettled space between our state of being and how it will end. I suppose we're all the time drifting from or towards something, including drifting in and maybe out of love along the way. So my next poem is a sonnet, and the subject is love itself, and it's from my collection In a Changing Light, which was published by Salmon Poetry, and it's titled Encounters. I might have met you once while on the road, but how was I to know you would be there? No map to guide, no picture to compare, so why would I have stopped or even slowed? And yet, if you had signalled me your code, I would have shyly shuffled, unaware that you and I could have so much to share. I'd still to learn what nature had bestowed. But later when we met, I knew you well, although I least expected you to be so blissful, yet so able to confound. Instead of catching me when first I fell, you put me in a boat that's still at sea, in search of shores which never may be found. The next piece is a reflection on the carefreeness of childhood, which for me was in a very rural location in the Irish Midlands. This one appeared in The Honest Ulsterman a couple of years ago. It's called Stepping Stones. We hop on stepping stones to cross the river on the way home from school, and where the water narrows its furrow, we learn through bets, dares and bravado to jump from bank to bank. We run free-spirited as the rain through wild-flowered fields, climbing gates, jumping stiles. We are high jumpers and pole vaulters, riders of bucking broncos, playing cowboys and Indians, cops and robbers, spies and spy catchers, goodies and baddies, all in one day. The only barrier to our stride is when it comes to sleep. Even then, our minds continue to chase adventure of all kinds. Snipers on the loose near the house, we dive to hide behind a giant clamp of turf. Something moves inside the shed, a head pops out and shouts, "You're dead!" When light creeps back to tap the glass, we crank up our boisterous engines and mingle with the whir and rattle of machines at work, the beat of barking dogs, and all the other moving parts of life being lightly lived, oblivious of the burden weighing on the ones who make it hum. In those past days, I suppose knowledge and information was held by some, but not freely shared and certainly not easily accessible as it is now. There were few enough sources of information, especially about some of the scandalous things that were going on. But scandalous things are still happening, and this poem is called Direct Knowledge. It was published in the winter 2022 edition of the Stony Thursday book, and opens with a quote attributable to Maya Angelou. Direct knowledge. Forgive yourself for not knowing what you didn't know before you learned it. Maya Angelou. It is said we should have known, but mostly we didn't, because we did not have the knowledge to know that things were other than they seemed, other than we were told to believe. It took decades and tribunals of inquiry to reveal truths, extract apologies, promises of no repeats. Now we have the knowledge to know that some things seem other than they ought to be. In another future, it may be asked again why we did not act. But because there are so many diverse sources of information now, of course, it's if you want to get to the truth, you need to ask those directly affected. My next poem was in the issue 6 of the Drawn to the Light Press, and it's titled Ask. Ask. If you don't know, ask those who have no money. Ask those who have no home. Ask those who have no jobs. Ask those who had to leave. Ask those who had to flee. Ask those with no voice. Ask the moneymakers. Ask all the politicians. Ask opinion shapers. Ask civil servants. Ask the teachers. Ask the clerics. Ask the street. Ask yourself. Ask. So before I read my final poem, I want to say thanks again to Damien for this opportunity. And my final poem is also from my collection In a Changing Light by Salmon Poetry, and it is called Footprints. Footprints. My thoughts are chirping birds, but all the wings are broken. The will cannot find the way. The child is now a man, and all the glory fades. All I ask is for the storm long since started to be ended, for this restless soul to strike a steady beat. I want to skim across calm waters, to reach the safer shore, from where I can look back in impish celebration, like the child who jumped across the stream and looked behind at the footprints he had left.
My next guest to Eat the Storms today is definitely no stranger to this podcast, and certainly no stranger to our printed journal The Storms, as she was one of the poetic stars of our inaugural issue. Last year we got to meet in person twice, once for the launch of The Storms, but prior to that I got to hear her read. She was one of the featured writers in Poetry Ireland's introduction series. She has been globally published and has been awarded literature bursaries from the Arts Council Ireland and Words Ireland, and has performed her work here in Ireland and also on an international stage, and regularly organises poetry events in her hometown of Athlone. She is a professional member of the Irish Writers' Centre and the founder of Global Writers. Her debut collection, Flirting with Tigers, is about to be published by Daedalus Press, and today, here sharing one of the poems from that collection, I'm so delighted to welcome back to Eat the Storms, Amy Abdullah Barry.
Hello, I'm Amy Abdullah Barry. I will read The Breath of the Rainforest. This will be included in my forthcoming book, Flirting with Tigers, to be published by Daedalus Press. The Breath of the Rainforest is also recently highly commended in the Shepton Snowdrop Festival, UK. I used to go camping in the deep jungles in Malaysia, so this is my story. The Breath of the Rainforest. We have set up the tent, pale yellow powdered sulphur round its perimeter to halt the slithering of snakes. The ash glow of the sky, the wind howling into night are all in my mind. I lie open-eyed on a sleeping mat, printing images in my head, collecting the echoes of jungle creatures, tarsiers, toucans, tigers, wild elephants trumpeting troubles from miles across the forest floor. In the morning, the cinnamon air draws me out. Sunlight hammers jagged patterns through layers of maranti leaves. Everyone dives into the river. Its sepia water like the teh tarik in my cup. Heading to the fern bushes to find the blooming rafflesia. A growl from the woody beams of bamboo, and I'm squatting eye to eye with a boar. Its skin is shiny black, rough and thick, designed for fighting. And I am ready. My own skin thickens in a breathless second. Startled, the animal vanishes. I pin the breath of the rainforest on my skin. Thank you.
Next up today, we have another fleeting visit, this time for a new voice to the podcast, and you know how much I love welcoming new voices to Eat the Storms, and if you want to be one of them and join us for Season 7 coming in May, then please drop me an email at eatthestorms@yahoo.com, where you can head over to www.eatthestorms.com and check out the details on what's required to be a guest. And let me assure you, being a guest on this podcast does not mean you have to be a published poet. Here on Eat the Storms, we are a platform open to everybody for at all stages of your careers. Now, back to this next guest, who is a social activist and currently completing a professional diploma at University College Dublin in Innovation for Sustainability. She became involved in poetry while conducting an ethnographic study of the White House poets in Limerick, while completing her Masters at the University of Limerick in 2015. Here with a poem that she wrote during the pandemic, this is Louise McCormack.
My name is Louise McCormack, and this is a poem I wrote during the pandemic. It's called Dúisigh. Alone, bored, for the first time in years, we remember the joy of silence amidst the isolation and fears. Agus braithníonn an domhan. The poultry industry hangs its head low, spreadsheets and zeros wiped as restaurants remain closed. A shock for nations unprepared as this contagion grows. Yet Gregor and Gates' warnings were published a decade ago. The golden arches of McDonald's are hypnotic, but 75% of emerging infectious diseases are zoonotic. Our relationship with animals fuels 10,000 years of infectious disease. HIV brought from the slaughter of chimpanzees. Measles from the domestication of cows. Lyme disease from ticks and rodent populations with their natural predators pushed out of the suburbs that we built. The common cold and MERS from the domestication of camels, as we roam this planet like primitive animals, chopping and cutting, burning and laying waste, buying and throwing out, wasting and pushing problems for another day. They knew this was coming. It was but a matter of time. But for the spreadsheets of zeros, now we'll pay for their crimes. With progress comes choices, promises we all have to keep. Will we pay the price in the supermarket for organic Irish beef? For eggs from chickens who can stand on their own 2 little feet? Or should we cut 30 cents and cram them in cages? Should we let disease and cruelty define the plastic ages? Our relationship with animals, the ones we adore, we plaster on Instagram, make them our Instagram whore. Others we raise in conditions we don't want to see. In Ireland, we're lucky many of our animals do roam free across the pastures of green and the rules of the EEC. But we're not perfect. Nobody is. We lean on China to produce goods, many which we don't even need. But this is not a Chinese problem. This is a human problem about our relationships with the other living things on this planet. Let's start this at home. Let's lead the charge against corporations and cutting corners, against birds crammed into cages, against cruelty to animals for an extra zero on someone else's pages. Alone, bored for the first time in years. Let's reflect in the silence. Let's sit up and face our fears. Agus braithníonn an domhan.
Now, next up, we have a little diversity of location, as so far we've been firmly established here in Ireland and over in the United Kingdom. But next up, we are heading over to Mauritius to meet an artist who started writing poems in English at the age of 14 and kept expanding her poetic skills in other languages, such as French, Mauritian Creole and Hindi. Now, her poetry has gone from being published in local newspapers to international journals and anthologies, and she's been the author of numerous poetry collections and also an experimental abstract artist, although she considers poetry to be her first love. She has so far written 13 books of poetry, and that marks her 30th year of writing poetry. And after that, she immersed herself in experimental short stories and is currently working on her first novel. She is one of the representatives of the Immagine and Poesia in Italy, an Italian-based literary movement uniting artists and poets. Her work has been selected as one of the poets for the Guido Gonzo Poetry Contest in Italy from 2016 to 2022. Here today to share a poem from her latest poetry collection called 30 Seashells. This is Vatsala Rahakeensoom.
Hello everyone, this is Vatsala Rahakeensoom from Mauritius. I'm a writer, a poet and an artist. I'm also a translator. Today I'm going to read a poem from my latest book entitled 30 Seashells. 30 seashells marks my 30th year of poetry writing. The poem I'm going to read for this podcast today is entitled A Girlish Thing. This refers to one of my childhood memories here in Mauritius. As girls, we really loved to eat the tamarind fruit. This citric food was very common among girls, and we really enjoyed eating that in our recess time. So, here is a poem. A Girlish Thing. We were between 5 to 8. Some of us wore neat, shiny, single long plaits. Some of us let our ponytails sway with the cadence of the tropical breeze. The youngest one had the cutest pigtails and two innocent dimples that could even cheer up the sun. Recess time, that was what we'd been waiting for. To have our packed luncheon was just duty. We had to eat because our moms told us we should. Others used to say that we should eat properly to remain healthy, to be strong, and to run faster. So we believed them. We obeyed. But our real moment, the time we'd all been longing for, the real girlish thing that gave some deeper meaning to our childish freedom, was none other than the savoring of the tamarind fruit time. Annuellement tamarin, we should say so in our native Creole Mauritian, Mauritian Creole language. We would each buy 2 to 5 tamarind fruits, and our game called for peeling the tamarind perfectly. If we pressed too hard, the tamarind shell would break into pieces and be mixed with the inner pulp, making it all messy. If we peeled it softly, slowly, or if we pulled at the top of the tail like Bart, our results would be undoubtedly outstanding. Within a few months of regular practice, all of us became winners of tamarind peeling. Thus went on our precious recess time, but it remained solely a girlish thing. The citric fruit was our delight. Boys were better off on the sunny playgrounds, mimicking the football heroes. Thank you very much for listening. Take care. Bye bye.
Well, my final guest today on Eat the Storms is new to the Poetry Podcast, but his poetry and performance skills are certainly not new to me and are certainly now very well known to everyone who was at the Fingal Poetry Slam Championships last year, where he won first place. But more about that later. He is from Coolock here in Dublin, where I also grew up. I have no idea why he has slightly different accents. And he is on a mission to make Ireland grand again, using his poetry to shed light on issues facing his nation, inspiring hope for a brighter future. On stage last year at that Poetry Slam, he slayed his way not only to claim the championship, but also into the hearts and admiration of every person who was sitting, listening, watching and cheering. So sit back now for the very bright light of James William Dillon, known to his fans as Jimbo.
How's it going, everyone? My name is James William Dillon, but if you're looking for me online, it's Jimbo's my name. And I have to thank Damien for inviting me onto the Eat the Storms podcast. So I want to share a couple of poems, which is hopefully you like them because I like writing them. So this first one is called Living the Dream. And it comes from when you ask people how they're getting on, they say they're living the dream. But they're obviously lying. You can see it in their face. And sometimes living the dream. Imagine you kept having nightmares. So this is living the dream. I'm living the dream, which really means people from my past keep popping up, being very vocal, disagreeing on how I do things. They come at me, But my wrist turn limp when I try and attack back. I step wrong off paths, have many heart attacks. My teeth always get chipped chewing the fat with dead celebrities. Everyone I love in my life has died at some point. Horrifically. But I'm living the dream. No sound comes out when I scream. I try but can't run away from stuff that scares me. The only thing that could stop me? A lobotomy. Nothing's what it seems to be, so I hope that's cold sweat that wet the bed and not me. But I'm living a dream. It could be a daydream or a fever dream. I halfway pray to be taken away in this far from narcoleptic state. This state of mind that's subconscious but not subpart to my own way of life. It dictates haphazardly, makes me the fool. 1 second I'm at a party and then a mountain peak with people from my old primary school, and I have no idea how it started at all. But I'm living the dream. You were there, and you were there, and you were there, all floating mid-air, so in this near-lucid state, as third eye tapping into the unknown abyss, don't wake me, hold back the prince's kiss, because I'm living the dream. Most of my poems are kind of on the jovial side, even though this one is kind of on the more serious side. But this is one of my personal favourites, and hopefully you like it too. It's called NDTGL. I invented an acronym, and if you want to know what it stands for, I'm not doing too good lately. Nah, you see, I'm starting to relish in people's failings. Once exciting, now trivial tasks I'm no longer able. Nicotine cravings. All these diets, I just can't shift the weight. And one more, mundane Monday, will result in blood-stained hands while I'm shackled to the interrogation table, refusing to give an official statement. So yeah, this needed to be typed out, because the words are so filled with rage, if written down would sear the page, and those close will consume the fumes and make you feel like this too. See, I'm not doing too good lately. I'm frustrated at your good news I hear on the daily. Everything on the telly irritates me. I feel like I've ruined lives and not been there at important times, so memories you can recall easily to me are vague and lack clarity. A what-if mentality has me lashing out internally, so even if it's nicey nice on the surface, best believe beneath it's being said through gritted teeth for an internal release. But even after that I can't find peace. Not even in sleep, my dreams haunt me. I'm not doing too fucking good lately. Life itself, it's magnifying my failings. Sharp change of direction, this knee starts grating. My mental health right now, it's in a cruel state. I'm destined to be broke forever and have everyone hate me. But in this current mood, I'd prefer the lonely urn sitting in a church that's empty. Take solace in the knowledge that if this is now out of my head, you won't find me anywhere near a toppled chair dead, having those closest to me grieving the fact that I cut short my destiny. You're more than a creation of your ancestors' naked gestations, fighting Father Time and Mother Nature. It's like you were born, so let's explore what that reason was for. And yeah, life right now is probably shit, but it gets better, so make sure you stick around for it. 'Cause it's okay, baby, if you're not doing too good lately. So I suppose that poem is dedicated to anyone who's been NDTGL before in their life. Because I say, it might be bad, but it'll get better. So I met Damien at the 2022 Fingal Poetry Slam, and I seen him go up on the stage. He had his rolled up jeans and his mustache, and I said, this guy means business. And I was right, because he's done a great job. I narrowly beat himself and another poet called Jessica Root. They were both fantastic. And this is the poem that done it for me. So this is kind of my signature, my trademark poem. Hopefully you get a good few of the references. But this is called Make Ireland Grand Again. I want to go back. I can't say exactly to when. Not so far back when the spuds were duds. Civilians dying in the rising before Dáil Éireann came to order, or all the troubles on the border. I'd like to cherry pick the best bits when Ireland was grand. I'd like to talk to those who built Newgrange, ask how they timed the winter solstice to a T, when Oscar Wilde roamed the streets or James Joyce during Ulysses, Celtic Tiger in its peak, and the only bust in sight was Molly Malone's. Everyone has a Tamagotchi. Italian 90 playing on the telly again and fuck Scalacci. The night Krista Borg scene read. Aspirations higher. Nelson dethroned and erecting the spire. McGregor. Not when he was flogging whiskey to outfellas, when he was made champ and there was talk of putting him on the stamp bandit coinage. The belittling of Rod Little. Ah, no, Eamon. Leave it bleed now. He wouldn't give us a lift to Colester. And of course, Celtic. What if Georgie Burgess got the snip? Garth Brooks has played some gigs. If Barry McGuigan had weak wrists or Johnny Logan had a lisp, we'd still be dancing in Billy Brennan's barn or around a pint of plain. If I drown in this nostalgia, these are the grand times I want to be found reeling in. I'd keep Bono. I like him. You'd have Katie Taylor thanking God another try by that lad Bod and less ATMs getting robbed. Pre-foot and mouth outbreak. Post. Henri's handball heartache. When the Pope came and kissed the land, that was grand. When we could withstand an orange weather warning, that was grand. When all the snakes were banned, that was grand. A time where everyone who wants it gets the shift. We all get taught French by the girls in Bewitched. The batter on your Bordeaux fish is always crisp. Fearless Paul Kimmage questioning Lance on his drug stance. Michael Flatley's ankles are wringing wet because of river dance. The 32 counties, if we get a chance. When the smell of our factories wafted through our streets, the mix of Cadbury's hitting the breeze blended with Tato's onion and cheese, perfectly in harmony. Father Ted gives every eulogy. And we stop mimicking the states. They want to be great, we'll settle for grand, as long as our homeland is where having the crack originates without debate. Michael D is handled with care by the safe hands of Packy Bonner so he can lay a reed whenever we need him. The leaves are always in free fall on Raglan Road. No matter where you go in the world, there's an Irish pub. We communicate in wink and elbow code. If we live with the clarity of Padraig Pearse's pen, we will make Ireland grand again. Erin Gabra Arish. Thanks very much for everyone for listening. Thanks again, Damien, for inviting me on. If you're looking for me online anywhere, it's at Jimbo's my name, all one word, or you can check out the website, jameswdillon.com. So thanks again for listening, and remember, stay bloody poetic.
Thank you so much, Jimbo, and you can now all see the reason that he won the Fingal Poetry Championships 2022. That was the first time I ever took part in a poetry slam, standing on stage and leaving the book behind. And when I finished and stopped shaking and stopped panicking, there was a moment where I thought, wow, well done, not bad, I'd survived. Then, of course, James William Dillon took to the stage and I thought, wow, that's how it's done. So congratulations once again. And of course, a shout out to Sheila Ryder, who was the host and organiser of the Fingal Poetry Slam. Sheila was one of our Storm stars because she is one of the featured poets in issue 2 of The Storms. She was with us at our launch 2 weeks ago in Swords Castle, and also she was on the podcast last week along with our 54 issue 2 stars. Sheila will be back with us again in season 7, so do stay tuned. And now back to the panicking. This is a poem of mine set in Paris, where I learned to understand for the first time what panic attacks were all about. This is called How the Dust Settles Regardless of the Weather. Sometimes the mind forecasts the day's weather. First thing in the morning when I know the plan is for indoor cleaning. Rehousing dust on cupboard tops that only this mind imagines. Age wages worry onto things that don't concern the moment. Meanwhile, midway through, I'm trying to learn to stress less about the next breath. Trusting the brain to pacify the panic. Pace, pause, peace. let dust settle. Smoking was a distraction to tension when sex wasn't available. Sometimes it was both. Before, after, in between. Sometimes it was only the cigarette that you could stamp out quickly when you'd taken the right amount of it inside you so as to remind yourself just how bad it was for you. Paris was never embarrassed by smoke or sex. Occasionally, when she was playful and you pliable, she'd let you take her to your lips, and you could feel her burning you out before you'd even brought the tongue to her tit. The French always moan about the weather, whether you wanted to hear it or not. Whether you were outside drowning or on the wrong side of the window to be truly touched. I learned how to panic first in Paris, at the end. And sometimes I wonder if it was because I was leaving that it began, or if it had nothing to do with that at all. Like dust on cupboards that we only imagine. That has nothing at all to do with any worry of the weather. For now, I'm trying to concentrate only on how things settle. Poets and procrastinators, readers and seekers in trousers or tiaras, non-conformers and unbelievers, gender X and gender equals. We've reached the end of another episode of Eat the Storms, the poetry podcast that has been available to you on Spotify, Apple, Anchor, Google, Breaker, Podbean, Player FM, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Castbox, Podcast Addicts, iTunes, basically anywhere that you like to call your preferred podcast platform. My name is Damien B Donnelly. I've been your host and producer, and I'm so grateful to the poets who have come to share their voices on the show today. And those stars have been Sarah Wallis, Phil Lynch, Amy Abdullah Barry, Louise McCormack, Vatsala, Rahakeensoom, and James William Dillon, aka Jimbo. Now, if you head on over to www.eatthestorms.com, there is a podcast section that's called Listen to the Podcast. And if you click on that, it will bring you to individual blog posts that cover each episode. If you click on today's episode, which was episode 14, season 6, you will find photos, bios, social media handles, and website links in order to find, follow, and be fabulous fans to all of my guests on today's show. Also, while you're over at eatthestorms.com, you can, as I said earlier, check out the details on how to join the podcast and be a guest stormer. We have just one episode left for season 6. We'll be with you next Saturday, and then we take a break, but season 7 will kick off at the end of April, beginning of May, and I'm already taking names for the guest list. And of course, while you're over there, why not pop into the Storm Shop and pick up your copy either of our inaugural issue of The Storms, the Journal of Poetry, Prose and Visual Arts, or our latest issue 2. Okay, you fantastic listeners, that's it for me for this week. I'll be back with you again next week on Saturday from 5 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, although it's a podcast so you can tune in whenever you like. Now, until next weekend, be good, be kind. If you're here in Ireland and you see snow, build a bloody snow person. And of course, as Jimbo said, until next time, I hope you all stay bloody poetic.
Oh, thank you.